Good morning, everyone. It is time for MMA Live Before Lock as we're here to get you ready for UFC Paris Lock. 2 hours from right now, the prelims, of course, they're at 12 o'clock Eastern time. Main card, 3 o'clock Eastern time. We're here for the next hour to break this one down for you. Leading up to college football Live Before Lock. If you know me, I'm a huge college football fan, so I've got a TV to my left. So I got college game day on. We all know in the Floyd household, college game day is on. It's Saturdays in the fall. Of course, appreciate everyone tuning in here. Of course, typically I would sit here and say, hey, I'm joined by the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr., but I'm actually joined by the guy who's been filling in for me on Live Before Locks, Greg, man. Great to be doing a show here with you. How you doing, bro?
Yeah, we've got early start time. So seeing some people saying it's a little early. Yeah, this is the first ever UFC card that's taken place in Paris, France. So for the longest time, MMA was illegal in France. So the UFC has been lobbying to try to get it legalized there. So that's the reason for the early start time. It's the first card they've had there. So they want to get it in prime time for the local time, try to build the market there. And that's also why we've got Ciryl Gane in the main event, who's the biggest French name fighter that we have right now. So that's why the early start time, if anybody was wondering.
Crazy story I saw on Twitter last night from Mark Raimondi of ESPN.com. So it's well known Francis Ngannou ended up, moving to Paris when he was homeless, and he literally brushed his teeth in the parking garage of this hotel, of this arena. He apparently where he slept was like right down the road from this arena. By the way, I think it's an important note about this is so Bellator has gone over to this same arena. The judges were not local judges that got brought in, so it's going to be your usual cast of characters. But well, we know. I like the thing where it's like, oh, there's not local fighters. And I'm also like, I don't think judging is quite as bad as the people make it out to be, but that's also just, it's something that's a fallout of betting where any kind of close fight, if it doesn't go people's way, it's the biggest robbery in the history of the sport. Yes. Every single Saturday, like we see every Saturday, there's 3 of the biggest robberies in the history of the sport that we've ever seen. I don't think it's as bad as most people think it is, but, Sal D'Amato, who I believe is going to be there in France today, is definitely one of the more questionable judges we have. And he travels everywhere. They put him in all of the cards. So it's going to be business as usual as far as that goes. Yeah, look, I mean, I've talked to regulators about this subject, and look, it's I think the reality is that fact of is these guys are not going to bat 1,000%. Yeah. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And you're spot on. The fact that when we have that score go the wrong way with the guy, whether we got a bet on or he's in our DFS lineup, we're crucifying that judge. Of course, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. I know Greg's had a video up over there on the Odds Shopper, which I watched it last night. Greg, we're very in line in terms of what you like over Prize Picks and what I like. There's been a little bit of movement over there at Prize Picks, so we'll talk about that a little bit later on here in the show. Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button. That really does help us out a ton. Of course, if you're not subscribed to Stokastic, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button so you know when the show is live here on the channel. Of course, if you're not a Stokastic Plus member, you want to get a little peek what's behind the paywall. Today's free premium data and tools are MLB ownership projections. So that is a tool that I'm using every single day. Well, I don't get to play MLB DFS as much as I would like to because I'm like, if I can't watch our shows, I'm like, I don't. And plus, there's lineup changes, and I got to be in front of the computer if I'm playing MLB DFS.
I mean, it's not quite NBA DFS because NBA that's like a full night's commitment. So
yes.
For me, MLB. So I know for you used to MMA. We generally, unless a fight gets scratched here and there, we know days in advance who we want to play. For me, MLB, it's like I usually know half an hour before the slate starts what the lineups are going to be. That's good for me compared to when I'm doing all our NBA shows starting a month and a half from now, where it's like I'm just at my computer from, like the time the slate starts to it locks because lineup changes happen and whatnot. But yeah, we do have all of the best MLB tools. Like I've had a really good MLB season, and I rely pretty heavily on our tools, like the Top Stacks tool, Top Pitchers tool, all of that. And then of course we've got a lot of great tools for MMA as well. So all of that stuff is, needed for me in my process.
Yeah, when I'm looking over our top fighter tool, obviously one of the things I've really started doing a comparison and contrast on in terms of how I'm developing my lineups is I'm looking at ownership and then I'm comparing that to the top 6% when we're talking about DraftKings and trying to figure out, like, as I look at the sheet that's in front of me, I talk about this on a strategy show. I've got like 4 different highlighter colors. And so I've just got this sheet just color coded beyond belief. Like, there is one color that is a limit exposure. And this is probably a 1% of the time that this happens. I've got 2 fights in limited exposure.
Ooh, could I guess which ones they are?
Go ahead.
All right. So, do you do it, by the way, just relative to your expectations of the fight, or also like ownership related?
It's a combination of how I see the fight going, ownership, and salary.
Okay. So if it's the same ones that it is for me, is one of them Vettori and Whitaker?
Yes, that's one of them.
Okay. So I do. So there's a couple of things. Number one is obviously this is maybe the highest level fight on the entire card. I'm really excited to watch it. I'm really skeptical it scores well for DFS because the way I see this matchup going is that Whitaker has arguably the best takedown defense in the division, 83% takedown defense. I think he has a striking advantage over Marvin Vettori. So the way I think this fight most likely plays out is Vettori attempts takedowns, isn't able to land them. The fight takes place on the feet, and there's going to be a lot of stall positions involved. Like, I could see this being a fight where Whitaker wins, but is just like 80 significant strikes landed in a scorecard decision. And then Vettori on the other side, maybe he lands a takedown, but then is only able to land like 50 to 60 significant strikes. And it seems very unlikely to me this fight finishes inside the distance. Now, is it possible? Of course, it's MMA. There are times where there are random knockouts all the time. We saw the last card, right? The last card we saw Kamaru Usman cruising to a victory, head kick by Leon Edwards. Like he says, pound for pound, bang, headshot, and that could happen at any point in time. But this fight, I think, is very likely to go to the judges' scorecards, and I don't think it's going to be crazy high pace. So we are on the same page with that one, it seems.
10 of Marvin Vettori's last 11 fights have gone the distance. I think this is more of, if you're looking to bet on the fights, that's where I'd be looking at the prop bets on this one of either guy winning by decision. I want to say Whitaker was like in the minus 150 range of winning by decision, and Vettori was in that plus 330 range. This is, Whitaker, this is his first 3-round fight since 2020. This guy's just been in a ton of 5-round fights. The other one might surprise you. It's the main event.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me that much. Because we just had a question in Discord channel right before we were starting. We had it from, let me make sure that I credit the right person. It was from 1.6 in our Discord channel. He asked you and I, how much Gane do you have? And I find it hard to avoid Gane entirely because I think that the top end of the pricing, a lot of the fighters are kind of sketchy for different reasons. So I'm going to have exposure to Ciryl Gane. But with that said, he's not a good DraftKings scorer. The only thing that benefits him here is that I do think that Tuivasa could be extremely aggressive to try to close the distance, and that could lead to a finish early for Ciryl Gane. So I think there's a lot of safety. The odds of Tuivasa winning very, very slim to me. I think even the line might not be wide enough. But the wins for Ciryl Gane in the UFC, 97, 112, 104, 94, 85, 89. Most of those scores are not going to cut it on a 12-fight slate when he's this much more expensive than everybody else. So Tuivasa I have very limited interest in. And then Ciryl Gane, relative to where the field's at on him, where he's expected to be well north of 50% owned, I'm probably going to have like half of what the field has on him.
It's a price point thing for me with Ciryl Gane. I mean, clearly he's a much better fighter. If Tuivasa is going to pull off the upset, I mean, look, we know the power he has in his hands is he's got to make this a fight in the clinch. He's got to get this fight up against the fence, make this kind of a dirty boxing fight. If you tell me this fight's at range, I love Ciryl Gane, but like I sit there and I say, okay. And by the way, I'm at 35% on Ciryl Gane, for just to put it out there. My thing with Ciryl Gane is I'm like, okay, for him to be up on that price point, I need triple digits. And I need 115, 120 points. I just don't know if that's a realistic thought process. And then if I'm putting Ciryl Gane in my lineups, it's like, okay, where am I getting salary relief? Now, there are some fighters underneath 7,500 from a GPP perspective, I like their potential finish upside. The two that stick out to me the most are Dustin Stolfus, and the other one would be Joaquin Buckley. And I will tell you, Buckley and Imanov is a priority fight for me today. I feel like that's a fight that's going to end via finish. Buckley, we know the power that has in his hands, but I do have some question marks in terms of his chin. The other fight that to me is a priority fight is Jourdain and Wood.
Yes.
I think it's likely going to go 15 minutes, but I think we're going to have a ton of volume. And what really intrigues me about Nathaniel Wood, which, by the way, I will tell you this. I was texting with Pete the Heat a little earlier this morning, and I said, hey, man, what do you like? And Nathaniel Wood was one of the fighters that he mentioned that he likes. And the thing about Nathaniel Wood is if he goes the takedown route, he might be able to rack up some points. We know how much of he's a volume puncher. So is Charles Jourdain. Like, to me, that's a priority fight. I don't know if you have any other priority fights for you.
Yeah, so I agree with you on the Nathaniel Wood versus Charles Jourdain fight. And I don't agree with the line movement on the fight either, because we have seen the line continue to move more and more in favor of Jourdain as the week has gone on since the opening. But to me, the question is this, and it's always hard to say when it comes to MMA, is what is Nathaniel Wood's game plan going to be? Because I think there's a really clear path to victory for him that would also score really well. And you mentioned it's the takedowns, because Charles Jourdain in his last fight against Shane Burgos was able to take him down a couple of times and had, I think it was 6.5 minutes of control time. And I think Nathaniel Wood is a better wrestler and grappler than Shane Burgos is. The question becomes, is he going to implement that kind of strategy? We've seen him do it in the past, and Jourdain only has a 51% takedown defense. Here's the concern, though. If Nathaniel Wood spends too much time on the feet trading with Charles Jourdain, he's very live to get hurt and finished on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think that this is a really high upside fight, because number one, both of them throw at a really high pace, 6.32 significant strikes landed per minute for Nathaniel Wood, 5.85 on the Jourdain side. So if they are striking, it's going to be really high paced. And I think that Wood is live to get hurt in that scenario. But if Wood attempts to wrestle, I think you could take him down almost at will based on some of the takedown defense we've seen in the past from Jourdain. So this is actually the fight I have the most exposure to right now.
It was a fight when I was, going in the Cruncher and I was creating groups. I considered telling Cruncher, give me one or the other in every lineup. I thought about it. I said, you know what? I did do one group over in Cruncher, and that group was it was Jourdain Wood, Edgar Perez, Taha Quinones, and Figlot. And I said, give me between 1 and 3 of those fighters. I really like Mikhail Figlot today against Faraz Azayam. Azayam, he was cut from the UFC. He was brought in because they wanted a local fighter on this show. But and I'll tell you, there's another fight that it's just a straight up leverage spot. And this is where we talk about, or using our tools and data over at Stochastic.com. I'm looking at the ownership projections on DiCerico and Kopylov. Kopylov has been a major disappointment since coming into the UFC. There was a lot of people that are really high on this guy. Has not done well. He's gone 0-2. And when I look at the ownership, both these guys are under 20%. And these are the type of fights that I'm looking for, Greg, and saying, look, I'm not saying I'm uber confident that this fight's going to be optimal. It's more of looking at this going, damn, the ownership is so low that if one of these guys can go out there and get 100 points, they're going to be optimal.
Yeah, very, very possible. Neither one of these guys are trustworthy at all. There's everything about this fight from a standpoint of just looking at the numbers. I understand why people wouldn't want to really get to this fight. Number one, it's a coin flip, right? It's basically a pick 'em on both sides. Kopylov right now -115, DiCerico -105, but at certain books, depending where you look, it's -110 on both sides. But then to your point before about the props in terms of this fight going to decision, it's also 50-50 to finish inside the distance or not. So I do think both of them are worthwhile as GPP plays. Asking me what I think is going to happen in the fight, I have no clue. I don't think either one of them is a significantly better play than the other, because neither of them are trustworthy. I think DiCerico probably has more wrestling and grappling upside. I think Kopylov probably has a little bit more finish equity, but neither of them are trustworthy at all. But for tournaments, that's not necessarily a bad thing to consider. And then something also, if you look at this card, is there's a lot of fighters making their debuts. And it's a lot of spots. There's I don't know what we're getting out of Eileen Perez. I don't know what we're getting out of the
So you mentioned Figlak. Figlak is fighting. It's making his debut against Zion. So I think there's massive upside in Figlak if he chooses to wrestle. Is he going to do that though? I assume so, but maybe not. And then the other one also is the Gomes Aaron's fight, where it's like, I don't know how we need to know what to, these are two fighters that are making their debuts that have fought really low level regional fighters. So I don't know what to expect from that fight either. So while I don't know what to expect from D'Chirico Kopylov, it's not like I know what to expect from most of these other mid-range fights.
Yeah, D'Chirico is one of those guys that I think he does have the wrestling upside that he could take this fight to the ground, rack up some of those points. And we know on DraftKings, we love grapplers. We love grapplers that can get the fight to the ground and keep it there, rack up that control time. William Gomez, I would call him a green fighter, does have fast hands. It's just one of these things of at 8,600. I'm scared. I'm scared to go there. I'm going to go there. He's chalk today. Don't really love getting to what the chalk is. And, of course, mention about all of our tools and data. Right now is a great time to sign up over there for a weekly pass. For new users only, get 50% off your first week of any weekly package, whether you want to get an MMA weekly package, maybe you want to get a platinum pass to everything on site. Right now, it's a great time because college football is starting today. NFL starts up next week. Of course, MLB's in range, so you got to check out that. In terms of MMA, it's all about that top fighter tool for me, comparing ownership, top 6 percentage. If you're a FanDuel player, I'm really on the FanDuel side of the equation. My first thing I ultimately look at, Greg, is I look at MVP ownership, which right now the MVP ownership for Ciryl Gane is crazy. So it is very easy to get different in terms of that MVP over there on FanDuel. And of course, you can use that promo code MMALBL to get 50% off your first week of any Stokastic Plus weekly pass. It's a great time to go over there. But over on the FanDuel side of the equation, that MVP, easy just to get different, just not take Ciryl Gane the MVP spot.
Yeah, and that's a good way to use the top fighters tool as well, is just to look at, all right, what are some of the ceilings of some of these fighters? What is their odds of being a top scoring fighter on the slate? And then it's like, all right, who has good odds that is not Ciryl Gane, who's going to be massively popular, which while I think that you and I both understand why it is that people are getting to Ciryl Gane, I think that his odds of finishing the fight early, probably not quite as high as a lot of the public seems to make it out to be if you've watched other Ciryl Gane fights. So yeah, I think that that's one of the easier ways to differentiate it on the MVP spot on FanDuel is looking at, Benoit Saint-Denis or looking at Magomedov or Imavov, or even going maybe a little bit lower and taking a shot on like Charles Jourdain to maybe get a knockout or something. Because I do think there's a lot of fighters that have finishing equity on this card, but there isn't any one I would point to and be like, oh, that is the guy who's for sure going to get an early finish.
When I was hand building some single entry lineups, I will tell you, I always struggle with, okay, who am I building my lineup around? That was because I was like, okay, I love Ciryl Gane to win, but it's that price point equation of it. And then I really found myself living in that under 8,500 and below spot. I don't think it's difficult to hand build lineups today. I think it's just a matter of when you get under that 7,400 and below, who do you want to get to? And look, I don't mind taking stops on Tuivasa, but also I think there's got to be an understanding of how low that floor is if he does not get win. Like you mentioned about, we had a question Discord, and we had a question last night that was essentially saying, in terms of the winners today that we project, who's got the lowest ceiling? And to me, I'm looking at a fight in terms of this aspect, and that's a Happaras and McDessie fight. I just don't see that as a high scoring fight unless those fighters get some knockdowns. If this is just a 15-minute striking affair, I just don't think it's going to be a high-scoring fight.
Yeah, so when you had said to me before that you had two fights you were fading, the one I hit, that was the Whittaker-Vettori, that was going to be my second guess, because that's another fight also that I find it unlikely the winner's going to score well. Here's the path where I think the winner does end up being optimal. Either McDessie, who's not been very active in recent years, he's now 37 years old. He's been fighting in the UFC for about 12 years now. You and I were talking about Tom Brady before we started the show. And it's like one day he's going to show up and he's going to look older. The same thing's going to happen with McDessie. I don't know when it's going to happen, but there's going to be a time where all of a sudden he's going to take a shot and he's just going to drop. And I'll be like, okay, John McDessie is kind of at the end of the road here. But based on all the numbers that we're looking at here, if it was not for age, I would favor McDessie to win this fight. I think he's the better striker than Nasrat Haqparast is. And Haqparast has struggled whenever he's seen a step up in competition. He's looked great against lower level UFC fighters, But in some of his recent fights where they've had him fight better competition, he's looked outclassed. He got really beat down by Bobby Green, one-sided fight. Bobby Green landed 188 significant strikes to just 76 for Haqparast. The fight against Dan Hooker totally got controlled in that fight. Dan Hooker took him down 3 times. That's not something that's going to happen in this fight. John McDessie has been in the UFC, like I said, for about 12 years now, has landed 0 takedowns. So this fight is going to take place on the feet. But if we look at some of the metrics on these guys, significant strikes landed per minute for McDessie, 5.57, 5.17 on the Haqparast side. So slightly higher output for McDessie, and also better striking defense. Haqparast gets hit 4.7 times per minute and only 4.02 for McDessie. So I think the line is way too wide in this fight. I actually did bet McDessie at plus 190. The one thing that gives me a little bit of concern here is just, is he not going to be able to take a shot because of the cumulative damage and his age at this point? Other than that, though, I think McDessie, if this goes to decision, I would favor him to win.
It's like we always say, Father Time is undefeated. Father Time catches up with everyone. We see it in sports all the time. And I mentioned this on the strategy show. Last time John McDessie won a fight via stoppage, 2015.
Yeah, this is a fight where I would not consider it very likely to be a high scoring. I kind of think Haqparast. So the way that McDessie ends up being optimal is there's a lot of sketchy underdogs today. If he wins and other underdogs just don't win, that's his path to being optimal, because I don't think it's going to be with a big score. Haqparast's path to being optimal is McDessie just looks old and he gets hurt and ends up getting finished. But that's where I start to make some of my projections and my exposures based on the betting lines. And we right now have Haqparast odds of finishing in round 1 is at plus 500 to plus 600. So if we find out, like, what's the fair odds of a first round finish from Nasrat Haqparast, that's generally how I've been doing some of my projections lately. The odds of that happening based on a non-vig betting line, it's like 13% of the time. So that's what I would put as the fair odds of Haqparast having the first round finish and being optimal. It's somewhere around, low teen percentage. And that's why I also think based on our current ownership projections, he looks like he's going fairly overowned.
And I would say this, like, if you're playing in, say, a 20 max or something along those lines, like, there are some things that I don't mind taking some crazy stances today, like unchecking Vettori Whitaker. I don't mind doing that just because of, like, I look at how I project that fight to go. I just don't see it scoring well in terms of DFS. Let's get into some super chats that have come in here. First, we got Sam Pierce, best DK captain. Am I crazy? Did Stolfus look great at the weigh-ins? Best underdog after weigh-in for GPP, and best lock still looking thick. Stolfus, it's one of these things of Magomedov is a finisher. 19 of his 24 wins are by stoppage. I think he's got to kind of drag this fight. I do think he does have a submission upside in that. In terms of the best DK captain, I mean, look, it would be very easy to say Ciryl Gane, but I'm looking to save some salary in that DK captain contest. That's why I'm going to go down to the fighter that's $12,000, and that is Mikhail Figlat. This is a guy that probably would have been fighting for the Cage Warriors lightweight title in his next matchup, but gets signed by the UFC. I think this is a showcase fight for him. He should be able to showcase on here. So that's who I would pick for the best DK captain.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think the price point is fairly prohibitive on Ciryl Gane as a captain play today. So I haven't built captain lineups yet. So I'm just kind of looking through to see some of the lower owned fighters I would consider. Figlak would be one, assuming because I don't think he would be super popular as a captain. We talked about the Jourdain and Nathaniel Wood fight. I think that would be a good one to consider. None of these cheap fighters do I really want to get to as a captain play. I think that most of them have fairly low upside for the DK slate. So yeah, I would probably say Figlak. Actually, I would agree. That's my favorite captain, or taking some shots on Nathaniel Wood or Charles Jourdain.
Yeah, the one thing is looking at the captain contest, DK did get the memo of the fight card change because Imavov and Buckley is now the third to last fight on the card. It's going to fall. It'll be right before Whitaker and Vettori. So I would have liked that would have been on the DK contest. That would have been get there a little bit as well. Jorge up next says, will Greg bring that same magic he brings on MLB suggestions? Which players would you go over the field on DK, and fighters that you'll go below the field? So I've already talked about with Surreal Gone. I am under the field. You mentioned that as well. I'll be under the field on Victorian Whitaker. I found when I was, finessing fancy crunchers, like to say, I put them both at 20% in terms of exposure. One to get a little bit there, but not too much. In terms of other ones, I would say I'll be over to under the field on. I'll be under the field on William Gomez. I'll be a little over the field on Jourdain and Wood on both sides of that equation. Under the field on Magomedov, over the field on Stolfus. And I'll be under the field on Aileen Perez. I told Cruncher 10% on her.
Yeah. So based on our current ownership projections, let's see. What are some of my bigger stands? Being underweight to the field on Surreal Gone. We have him being really, really popular today. And it's twofold. Other than that, you and I are both questioning his upside. It is not easy to get up to his $9,500 salary this week. He's $9,500. There's a $200 price gap to get to Stephanie Egger at $9,300. Then another $200 down to get to Benoit Saint Denis. So I find that Surreal Gone, just where he's at on his price point, and the fact that I'm not all that confident in a lot of these underdogs today. Like I'm building a lot more lineups in the mid range than I normally do. So just based on price point alone, I find it hard to get to Surreal Gone. Even if we were to take out questions about his upside out of the equation, Figlak is somebody I'm going to be overweight to because I think there's a lot of wrestling upside, and Zayam just doesn't do anything. If Figlak is going to be aggressive in this fight and look for takedowns, I think he probably is going to be able to take Zayam down and just hold him there for a lot of fight, maybe earn a submission also. The question just becomes, does he get nervous with this being his UFC debut or anything like that? But based on his current ownership projection, he's somebody I'm overweight to. Khalid Taha, I think he has a lot of finishing equity. He's somebody I'm going to be overweight to in the mid-range. Nathaniel Wood looks like he's going to be pretty modestly owned as an underdog play. And then another one too is Jarno Aarons. And I have no confidence in this whatsoever, other than the fact that this is a fight that I consider to be really high variance with two fighters making the UFC debuts. And he is currently projected to be one of the lowest owned fighters on the card. So with that in mind, we've got a fight that we literally have no clue what the hell to expect from. We know there's a lot of variance in MMA. Why not take a shot on an underdog that's virtually going unowned, honestly, where I think a lot of the underdogs are pretty sketchy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I found myself in that mid-range too, and I like the lineups I was putting together. That I didn't have to go too low to get some of the lineups I like. Of course, this is Live Before Lock. We are sponsored by Prize Picks. Of course, when you sign up over at Prize Picks, use that promo code AWESOME. They got instant first match deposit of up to $100. And there are some props over there at Prize Picks, Greg. I'm with you. I was watching your video last night there on the Odd Shopper channel. I mentioned on Thursday the Robert Whitaker significant strikes prop, which on Thursday it was 60.5. When I was checking a little earlier, it's 63.5. I still like the over in that situation. I think that's an easy overplay.
Yeah, sorry, I was muting some idiot in the chat. Can you repeat that again?
No. In terms of the Robert Whitaker significant strike prop, it was 60.5. Now it's 63.5. I still love the over there.
Yeah, so I know you had mentioned that you watched the Prize Picks video that I recorded the other day, and there's three props that I really like quite a bit for these. Robert Whitaker was one of them at 63.5. You just consider how I think this fight is going to play out and how you and I both broke it down before. We think this fight's going to decision. We don't think this is going to be a fight that's going to be finishing inside the distance in all likelihood. And currently at the books, let's see, what is the over-under currently sitting at? Yeah, this fight is minus 315 to go over 2.5 rounds. Probably going to take place on the feet. We've got Robert Whitaker with a 83% takedown defense. So this fight takes place on the feet and it goes to decision. It just doesn't take that much for Robert Whitaker to be north of 63.5 significant strikes. So I like the over there a whole bunch. The other one too that you and I talked about before about a fight that we think probably goes to decision, Akparast against John McDessie. Both of them throw at a fairly high clip, both of them landing right around 5 significant strikes per minute. So with that in mind, if this fight goes to decision, and it's almost certainly taking place on the feet, McDessie, 37 years old, has landed 0 takedowns in the UFC. Akparast, I believe off the top of my head, has landed 1. So with that in mind, fight's probably taking place on the feet. And if we just extrapolate, 5 significant strikes per minute out of Akparast in a fight that goes to decision, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, 75 to 80 significant strikes. So that's one that I think also makes a lot of sense.
I like the Charles Jourdain over 70.5 significant strikes. When you look at, what I project that fight to be, a fight that does play out majority on the feet, unless Nathaniel Wood is able to get the fight to the ground. I think Jourdain can easily hit that 70.5 number. Some other ones that, I know people have really hammered that Stephanie Egger significant strike prop. It's gone down 7 strikes since Thursday. It's now 28.5. It's a fight that she should be able to take that fight to the ground. Did you see Perez at the ceremonial weigh-ins?
I did not. What happened?
She decided to show off her twerking skills.
Okay. So this is also, she's looked really good based on the limited amount of footage you could see on her, but she has fought nothing but garbage fighters. Yeah. Like, I don't know what the combined record of them is, but it's one of those really padded records. And it makes it hard to know what to make of her. Like, kind of like what was the Egyptian heavyweight who made his debut about a month ago?
He beat
Dontel Mays.
Yeah.
So the point that I wanted to make here,
I can see his face. No, I can't think. His name's just not popping up my head.
So it's the I'll look it up while I'm talking, but it's the same thing where he looked really good in his tape footage, but it was also a thing where it's like he's fought nobody. So there was all this line movement towards Dontel Mays because there was just this assumption that, all right, this guy, sure, he looks good on Hamdi Abdulwahab. Yeah. So Hamdi looked really good on tape, but it was against nobodies, and so everybody's just like, whatever, this guy's probably a fraud, and just Dontel Mays got steamed, and then Abdullah, he looked pretty good in that fight, especially in the early going. He looked really, really good for a heavyweight. Like, any kind of heavyweight that could wrestle and grapple a little bit is, going to have advantages. So the point I'm going to make here with Eileen Perez is that she's also looked really good on a regional tape, but has fought against nobodies. It doesn't mean she's good or bad. It just kind of means that she's an unknown. So it's another fight that I don't really know what to make of. One thing that I do think kind of stands out is that Egger is pretty good inside the distance prop. She's plus 125 to win inside the distance. So that is something that's pretty appealing to me, because I do think that she's going to be the lowest owned of the payout options.
Yeah, no, it's a fight that just scares me. Anyone who's watched this knows I really hate rostering the first fight of the night, because either your night gets off to a great start or it gets off to a really crappy start. Let's move over to some other super chats here. CS. So I guess apparently CS calls you Josh on various shows.
What's that?
CS goes, "What's up, gents? Greg, Josh on the strategy show. I did not call him Greg. LOL. I'm never calling you Josh."
I forgot. So we did have, that's right, I forgot about that. Like 3 weeks ago, CS left a super chat, and he said, "I have a question for Josh," when he was asking me. And yeah, I was very offended by that. There's very, very few things that'll upset me more than that. So Coach, I appreciate you. And yeah, I forgot about that until now. See, now we're opening up sore wounds. Now I forgot about that. I erased it from my memory. Now it's back.
He goes, same question out of 7 555 lineups. How many Gane, how many Ta, and how many 0? So 7 lineups. Mm-hmm. For Gane, at the most, I would probably do 3. Tuivasa,
0. Out of 7, just the odds that I project him to win. That, and I think Tuivasa, just because I think Tuivasa's ownership is really difficult to project today, because people like him so much. Like, I think he's going to get ownership based on fan sentiment. That isn't going to be based on likeliness to win, isn't going to be based on his realistic upside. So I think that Tuivasa is probably going to end up with more ownership than we're projecting, just because, the way that we do projections, we're a data and stats based company. Yeah. It's hard to include that human element. We have Tuivasa projected for 13% ownership, which I think is would be a reasonable amount for the field to play. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up coming in closer to 20%, just because he's such a fan favorite, and people like, I want him to win so I can watch him do a shoey afterwards. Like, I actually think people are going to roster more because they like him.
Look, I think for the most part, a majority of people are going to be rooting for Tuivasa, but I think we all know the reality is this is a surreal Gane fight. But yeah, everyone wants to see him go out there, knock out, get on top of that cage, someone throw him a shoe, and then someone throw him a beer. Now, I mean, the big question would be, is like, there has got to be a book out there that's got a prop bet on what beer gets thrown up to him. He has his own beer company. He has his own beer company.
Like, are there any weird French beers?
I don't know. I know his last fight, someone threw him a Stella. Like, it is just the thing that's just amazing about this is, and first off, he should never fight in the UFC Apex. He should always fight in an arena.
Agreed.
And it's crazy every time he wins. How many people like have shoes and a beer in their hand? It's nuts. Like, first off, if you ever see me doing a shoey, Greg, you need to start calling some people because clearly something's wrong.
So something's got to miss in Jason's life.
Yes, there is no way. Yeah. There is no way. I wouldn't even do it out of a brand new shoe. No way. I don't get why he has to spit in it. Like, that's the part.
Well, you got to make it gross because it's not gross enough as is. You got to spit in it to add a little bit more to the mix. It gives it a little more flavor or something, apparently.
Yeah, the last time he fought, I'm sitting in a bar, and as he wins, I started looking around to see if anybody's taking their shoe off.
Yeah, probably. And do you know how, so also getting to my point about him being a fan favorite, ties into the shoey and everything. Do you know how hard it is to knock Derek Lewis out in Texas and to get the entire crowd backing you? The crowd's going nuts. They're on their feet because one of the most popular fighters in the UFC who's from that area just got knocked out because people are like, yeah, we're drinking fucking beers out of shoes now. So like that's how much of a fan favorite he is. And it's primarily, because he has a fun fight style and he drinks beers out of shoes.
Yeah.
Which is not a reason to play somebody in DFS.
But yeah, I mean, like, going back to that question, Coach, I would say at the absolute most, I would put Tuivasa in one lineup just to maybe cover your bases. But if going zero, I don't mind that at all. Sam with their super chat, he says, thoughts on GPP lineup, Jacarico, Gomez, Jourdain, St. Denis, Stolfus, Taha. I'm scared of Wood since Wood moved up in weight. Now, look, the thing would look good. And his 145-pound debut. I mean, look, the guy cut a ton of weight. Now, from a height standpoint, he doesn't have the ideal weight at 145 pounds. But I think in terms of his, the rest of his frame, he does fit at 145 pounds. Sam, I would say I like that lineup. I do like that lineup. Taha does scare me a little bit. Stolfus, I mean, look, I think he's got to drag the fight out a little bit, but the rest of that lineup, Gomez, I don't know what to expect. The one thing I would say that I do like about that lineup is you're getting away from a lot of the chalk.
It's definitely a different looking lineup. The only fighter in there that's going to be popular, St. Denis is going to be popular, but I do think he's the best pay up option on the slate, so I don't really have any issues with his ownership. I don't like Dustin Stoltzfus that much for a couple of reasons. Number one, I just don't think he's particularly good. I don't think he's a lot of win equity in the fight, and then even if he wins, I question how well he scores. Like, what is the path to upside for Dustin Stoltzfus? It's hard for me to see it because I don't think he's landing takedowns in this matchup. He's not a good striker. He's a very low output striker, and he doesn't have power. So is he going to land like a fluke flash knockout? Beyond that, it's hard for me to see because these have been the results of his UFC fights to this point. Last fight, he won against Dwight Grant. Nothing happened in that fight. He scored 77 fantasy points. Then his losses before that, 46 fantasy points, 35, 34. This seems like a guy who in his wins is generally going to score like a max of 80 fantasy points. And that's something that's just hard for me to get behind because I don't think he's likely to win. And even if he does win, I don't think he's likely to be optimal. So that would be the guy I like the least in your lineup, Sam.
The one thing about Magomedov, first time he's fought since December 19th, 2020. That was in KSW. He's had 3 canceled fights in the UFC over the last 2 years. He did compete back in the PFL in 2018. So, it's always kind of a little bit of a concern when you're talking about nearly 2 years away from competition of what that could be. Samuel, his super chat, favorite MVP. So I'm going to guess you're asking about the FanDuel side of the equation, which we talked about that a little bit. Like, to me, it's I want to get away from that chalk of Surreal Gane. Outside of Gane and St. Denis, they're the only ones that we're projecting over 10% in that MVP spot. So, like, you can go literally anywhere outside of those two guys. Like I mentioned a little bit about Mihail Figlot. I mean, we got him projected at 2% in terms of the MVP.
So I would say that I think Figlak has a little more upside for DraftKings scoring purposes than FanDuel scoring purposes. But I'm so low on ZM as a fighter in general because, I mean, talk about somebody who really doesn't do anything. His last fight against Terrence McKinney, and I get McKinney's very difficult to deal with in the first round, but Ziam lands one strike and then just gets taken down, gets dominated on the mat, gets submitted. Before that, he fought against Luigi Vandramini. This was a win for Ziam. He scored 46 fantasy points in a win.
That's so difficult to do. Like he just doesn't do anything. And since what we have seen about Figlak on his regional tape is he has looked fairly aggressive, right? He's looked like somebody who's going to move forward. He's going to push the pace. He's going to shoot for takedowns. Outside of him, like we were saying before, being a UFC debutant who gets really nervous and just is hesitant to pull the trigger, I think he has massive advantages over Ziam. And if he just looks to shoot takedowns, I could see him scoring really well. So to Jason's point at 2% ownership, yeah, I like that. And I do feel pretty good about him winning as well. Like, I think he's very safe.
Samuel also asked about top of leverage plays after seeing the weigh-ins. Weigh-ins really didn't affect me too much. After looking at them, kind of, just look like simple weigh-ins. But to me, like I mentioned about earlier, like when I'm looking at a leverage spot, and to me, it's the Jericho and Kopylov, and it's just a straight up ownership aspect, just because they're getting so low ownership. And you're talking about a price point on DraftKings at 8,200 and 8,000. If either one of these guys, and Jericho, especially if he could use those takedowns, I really love that price point, 8,200. So that would be my leverage spot to go to.
Yeah, so the weigh-ins have zero impact for me. Like unless there was one of those situations where somebody's weighing in, they weigh in with like 3 minutes left, they're shaking to get on the scale, and they need help getting off it, and they look compromised. Other than that, I'm not really putting too much stock into weigh-ins. So the way I look at leverage is just going to more be based on what are the betting odds say about likelihood of fighters to win, and then what is their DFS ownership. So based on that, I think the number one overall leverage play on the slate is Jarno Aarons. And it's not because I'm confident in him. I don't know what to expect from this fight at all, but Aarons is projected for 14% ownership. Gomes is projected for nearly 40% ownership. And if you look at the betting line right now, yes, Gomes is favored, but it's not like he's favored in a way where he's minus 400 or something like that. Yeah. He's a minus 220 favorite. It's plus 180 on the other side. So if we're to find out what are the fair odds of Aarons winning this fight, vig free, it's still like a 34% chance he wins the fight. So if you're telling me somebody has a 34% chance to win a fight and they're only 14% owned and their opponent is 39% owned, that's a leverage spot to me. Is it one that works out more often than not? No, like the numbers suggest that it's going to lose more often than not. But when it does win in large field tournaments, you're getting a significant amount of leverage on the field. So just based on the definition of leverage, that's what I view as a leverage spot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I'm looking at leverage, a lot of that's an ownership play, but it's also looking, at our top fire tool, that top 6% of trying to figure out some of those angles that I can hit it with. Of course, coming up right after us will be college football live before lock. And you got to take advantage of the promo we have going on right now for our college football weekly package, where you can get it for only $1 for your first week. It's a great way to introduce yourself to college football DFS. You'll get player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, access to our export Discord chat, and so much more. You can just click that link in the video description below, or use the promo code Heisman at checkout. That's code Heisman for your first week of Stokastic plus college football for only $1. And be sure to head over to Stokastic.com right now, as we do got a free article up for there on the main page, our college football DFS picks. So be sure to check out that over at Stokastic.com. Ben and Matt will be coming up next. I've been checking out Matt because I'm in the college football pool. So I've been checking out all of Matt's content over OddsShopper this week, trying to, because it's, look, college football, there's so many teams out there, So Matt and Ben do an incredible job for us.
I'm genuinely confused by Matt's knowledge of college football, because I know for me personally, when it comes to college sports, there's so many teams, there's so many players, and he knows all of them. Like there's nothing that he wouldn't know. If you went up to Matt Gajesk and you're like, hey, I'm in the Wisconsin area, and there's a Pop Warner football game going on down the street, he'd be like, oh yeah, there's this player's being undervalued. Oh, this kid got really fired up and got in a fight 3 weeks ago. So he's he knows everything there is to know about football. He's watched every game ever. So legitimately, I think he might be the most knowledgeable person about all levels of football that I've ever seen.
Like on College Game Day earlier, they're playing this game of where did this quarterback transfer to in the transfer portal? I feel like Matt would 100%. He would need like 2 seconds. Oh, he went there. Yeah.
So a couple times I did the Showdown Live before lock with them last year. And we talk about value plays like, oh, is there anybody who's, like 1,000 that's projected for 5% ownership or $200 for the DK showdown slate? Do you think is a worthwhile value? And he'd be like, oh, he knew how many snaps each of these guys got while they were in college and stuff. So if you guys don't know anything about college football, which I know I don't, that's what's really valuable about our college football package is that Matt G has you covered because he knows everything. You don't have to know anything. You just listen to Matt.
Yeah, just and check those guys out here. They'll be up here at the top of the hour for college football live for live. Of course, you got any questions before we get out of here, hit those up there in the chat. We'll get to those as we do go on, of course. So be sure to smash that thumbs up button. Let's try to get those likes over 100 before we get out of here on this edition for Live Before Lock here. In terms of is there a fight we're not talking about?
Yeah. So one that we've talked about in passing that I wanted to, I was curious to get your opinion on it. Benoit Saint-Denis against Gabriel Miranda. For this reason, whoever wins this fight, I expect to score very well. Saint-Denis, from what we've seen from him in the UFC, he's been, really aggressive. He is clearly also very tough because he had that absurd fight where I can't remember who the ref was. It was some ref who's reffing a UFC fight for the first time. And after this fight, Dana White came out, was like, this guy's not allowed to ref our fights anymore. And he got pulled from the card because it was Benoit Saint-Denis' fight against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, where it was Saint-Denis was dead at like the end of the first round, and the ref just kept letting it going and going and going. So Saint-Denis is clearly very tough, but he's also really aggressive. And we saw that in his last fight where he landed 3 takedowns against Nicholas Stolze, ended up finding a finish. But on the other side also, if you look at the Tapology page for Miranda, like
I was going to go this route.
like if this guy wins, he's going to win probably by first round submission and score really well. And if he does not win by submission in the first round, he is getting finished himself. So I think this is one of the highest upside fights on the slate. The two that I think, if you're asking me, which 2 fights am I most confident in, the winner scores really well. One is going to be the Nathaniel Wood and the Nathaniel Wood fight against Charles Jourdain. And the other one is this one, Benoit Saint-Denis against Gabriel Miranda. I want to be overweight to both sides of this fight, but I was just curious to ask you, how live do you think Miranda is to win? Because he's somebody who's historically gassed. Like he's never had success past the first round, but then also he's taking the fight on short notice. So the betting odds indicate that he's going quite a bit under-owned, but the same thing goes for the other side on Saint-Denis.
One of my notes on Gabriel Miranda is not the greatest of strength of schedule based on some of the fighters that he's competed against. Now, if you go to his Tapology page, so back 2016, he gets a armbar win against Diego Oliveira, who's 5-0 in his career. Diego has not fought since then. But if you click on the event page, the first thing you get is the Tapology warning. This promotion has been flagged by Tapology, a pattern of record padding and mismatches. Unless further evidence emerges regarding the legitimacy of this organization's events, any new bouts belonging to this promotion will be flagged and we view as Tapology records of participating fighters, which is basically saying, we look at their matchmaking and say they're just not doing well there. It's just one of these things, like something we talked about a little bit earlier. When someone comes into UFC and you see some of these opponents, you just go, oh man, I don't know if I want to get there. I do like Saint-Denis in this matchup. He's probably one of my, if not my favorite 9K option, the second 9K option, especially when I'm trying to get away from that price tag of Ciryl Gane where I can save $400. But I really do. He's one of those guys I like today. I thought you were going to maybe mention Khalid Taha and Christian Quinones as a fight that maybe we haven't talked about a lot. Taha was, when I asked Pete what fighters he liked, Khalid Taha was the other fighter he mentioned to me.
Yeah, and one thing I'm going to mention about Gabriel Miranda's Tapology page, he has a loss against Hiroki Nagoka. This is one of the weirdest records I've ever seen. I don't even know how this is possible. His record is 22, 19, and 12. How is that? So number one, that's a shit ton of fights to have, but how do you have 12 draws on your record? Like that's something about that is really
happens a lot in Japanese MMA. A lot in Japanese.
Is still a lot though. I mean, that's
look. If you want to go down the Tapology rabbit hole, just go Jay Ellis.
Which one?
Jay Ellis.
Jay Ellis.
Jay Ellis. ELLIS. Just wait till you see that record. Jay Ellis will fight anybody. anytime, anywhere, any weight. And
16 and 106. Oh, that's not a great record.
Yeah, I remember.
So this guy is a professional jobber, 38 years old, and yeah, how often does he fight? Like he must fight every 2-3. Oh my god!
Oh, yeah, dude, he'll fight anytime.
2022,
anywhere.
He fought twice in February. Then he fought in March. He fought twice in April. Then I don't know why such a long layoff. He didn't fight from April again until August. But yeah, he's gotten finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's gotten finished 7 times just in the last 8 months. That's not great for your long-term health. That's fairly crazy.
I remember a regional matchmaker saying to me, he goes, the one thing about Jay Ellis is no matter what, he will show up. He goes, you can't say that about all fighters on the regional scene. He goes, no matter what, he will show up and fight. But yeah, that's some of those Tapology records that you just look at and you go, oh, okay.
Yeah. So really quick to answer the question you had about the Taha fight. If the UFC changed their drug testing policy and it's like, we're not, screw all this blood testing and urine sampling, we're doing it based on the eye test, Khalid Taha is getting flagged immediately. This dude is a brick shit house and he hits really hard. So his record, I think, is not really a fair indication of how talented of a striker I think he is, because the fight he had against Tony Barcelos was a banger. That was a great fight. And I do think him going up against Quinones, if this fight is going to be them standing and trading on the feet, kind of what happened when Quinones was on Dana White's Contender Series, Taha can knock him out. Taha is strong. He hits really hard. If the fight goes to decision or if Quinones looks to wrestle, yeah, I do think he's going to have advantages in that department. And I think that he would win if it goes that long. But in terms of mid-range fighters with finish equity, I think Taha is one of the more likely fighters to win inside the distance.
Yeah, I have, my gut feeling is I think the first and second fight have a high probability of both being in the optimal lineup by the time we get to the end of today's card.
Is this true? Somebody said that Jay Ellis has a submission win over Gerald Mearshart. Oh, he does. Yeah. In in 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go down the list, Jay Ellis has fought a ton of guys who have either are currently in the UFC or have fought in the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, who has time to go through all these fights because there's 700 of them and he fights 3 times a month. But yeah, it's crazy. And then even, he fought Anthony Pettis back in 2008. Yeah, this is a pretty crazy record. He's had multiple fights against Pat Curran. When's the last time he won? Come on, dude, retire. What are you doing?
He won a couple years. He won like 2 years ago. I remember he won the fight and like literally, and it was a text message chain. It's like, holy crap, dude, Jay Ellis won.
Yeah, he won against Rodrigo Almeida to improve his record to 15 and 100 at the time.
And Rodrigo Almeida was seen as kind of a nice prospect too.
Yeah, this is a crazy record.
I know, but of course, coming up next is college football live before lock. I'll be working here in front of the computer, so if you're in our Discord chat, if you want to ask me any questions, I'll be in there as well. Of course, appreciate everyone tuning in here for live before lock. Of course, Greg, always great doing a show with you here today. There you see it on the screen. We got a ton of shows for you here today. Of course, I know Greg will be working away with all his lives here today, so appreciate everyone tuning in. Be sure to keep it locked here at Stokastic.com. Coming next is college football live before lock. Y'all have a great day, everybody.